Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this podcast series titled Saving Men. It's great to have you guys back here. This episode, I'll be running solo. Shout out to Titilayo for running the first episode with me. And in that first episode, we're able to establish a couple of stuff. If you missed it, you can check out the link at the bottom of this video. We're able to establish a couple of things around the role of men and when the role of men is missing, how it negatively affects the world. We looked at a couple of research, we shared opinions, amazing session. One of the major things that we also realized from that session is that it would seem like the role of men is changing in recent time as a result of a number of factors. One is societal expectation, economic factors, cultural factors, and the missing role of fatherhood or the missing role of more role models for men to follow. You see, as I would say, it would seem like for us men, um, a couple of things have been passed down to us. Yes, you have to get a job, you have to provide, you have to protect, you have to get married, you have to have kids, but it will seem like we are missing the reason for these things. Okay, it seems like we don't seem to know why we are doing these things. Okay, we often hear the statements like be a man you be, but how do we navigate these things? How do we know how to make decisions when we are faced with situations or circumstances that require us to play a role as men? I want to share a funny story from way back, real life story from my friend. I'm sure he's probably going to watch this and laugh as well. This was about 12 years ago. So um, our friendship was such that he got married before me, he had kids before me. So maybe like a year difference or thereabout. So every time we engaged, it was a very interesting session because I was curious to know how he navigated certain decisions, how he navigated courtship, how he navigated the wedding ceremony, how he navigated having kids. So this particular gist, as we'll call it, he was sharing his experience of how they had their first child. So they traveled away to have their first child, and when it was time to have the baby, his wife was in labor. It was an extended labor, and she was in pain. And after a while, the doctors came out like, you know what, we have to perform a cesarean section. Now, if you're not Nigerian or if you're not traditional, if you don't come from a traditional church in Nigeria, there's a certain stigma associated with having children through CS, as they will call it, cesarean section. It will seem like you don't have enough faith, or it seems like it's not the will of God. So when they asked his wife for consent, his wife was too exhausted to even think. So she was like, "Let my husband decide." And according to my friend, that was his first one of the major times he had to like take a decision. Like a human being's life is literally in his hands. So he called his mom and his mother-in-law on one phone and on the other phone. And the moment he mentioned the cesarean section, they flipped. Or they were like, "No way! My nothing must happen to my child," or as we say in Nigeria. So he had his wife waiting for him to make a decision. The doctor was waiting for him to make a decision, and his mother-in-law, his mom were all waiting for him to make a decision. What a pressure! I mean, eventually they had the cesarean section successfully, and everything went fine. So these are funny. I mean, imagine the amazement in me as I was listening to this conversation, because I was just wondering what would I have done in that situation. There is no manual, there's no book for you to sort of go through real quick to see how to navigate such decisions. So you wonder, what does our muscular strength have anything to do with this role? How do we understand our uniqueness as men? You see, over the years, a couple of ethical theories have been put together by men as a way of trying to answer life decisions or a model to help man make decisions or live their lives. Various forms of ethical theories. We have things like postmodernism, we have things like relativism, we have things like egoism, you have utilitarianism, and all sort of ethical theories. And in my own opinion, and just to give a very brief paraphrase, the ethical theories are largely positioning things like truth is relative, everybody has their truth, Truth is just a classification, it has no meaning. The concept of right or wrong are just semantics and all sort of things like that. And in my own personal opinion, based on my research and learning and listening, I think that while some of these ethical theories has benefits on how man should live, I think they are largely self-refuting. And I'm going to try and explain that as we go on. I believe that these are just attempts by men to to reject God's design for how we should live our lives, to reject the creator's design on how we should live our lives, you know. So, to make sense of a lot of things I'm going to be saying today, I want us to establish two things. One, I want to establish the fact that truth is universal. Truth is universal. Truth is objective, it's not subjective. The concept of truth is subjective, is objective, not subjective. And it's important to start from there so that we can rationalize our way, with a standard. I like how Aristotle said this. I'm going to read it out because it's kind of like a tongue twister. It says that to say of what is that is not, or of what is not that is false. While to say of what is that it is, and of what is not that is not is true. Essentially, it's a binary. It's yes or no. I mean, in most instances, truth is objective. Truth is standard. Truth is not subjected to opinions. And I feel like if anyone denies that, it's self-refuting in the fact that some things are we build our lives with the assumptions that some things are expected to be constant, right? The fact that you take a flight, you expect the law of gravity and the law of thermodynamics not to change because those aircraft are built on the measurement that some things will not change, on some constants. We build our homes, we drive our cars on the assumptions that some things won't change. And truth is exactly in the same fashion. The other thing I want us to establish is the law of reasoning. In the study of logic, it's advised that we agree on the same terms or terminology or definition of terminology so that our rational reasoning is on the same foundations. For example, if we say that wealthy people are not nice, right? We need to agree on what is wealthy. How do we define wealthy? Is wealthy someone that has $1 million in an account, or $50,000 is also qualified as wealthy? So we need to also agree on some definition of terms, so that our logical reason would be rational. All right. So now I'm saying all this to build the foundation for what I want to be sharing today that I know would highly impact and bring a lot of light to this podcast, this series, Saving Men. The focal point of what we're analyzing today is fundamental to what influences our habits, our decision making, and how we see ourselves, and pretty much our sense of self. Let me put it like that. I've come to realize that this phenomenon right here has influenced a lot of not just men but human beings and how we think and how we live our lives and how we make decisions. You see, I would encourage you to listen. It doesn't matter. This podcast may be saving men, but it's for everybody. It's for men, women, girls, boys. And for if you're a lady watching this, it's important for you to not settle for less in how you raise kids, in the choice of men for marriage or choice of men for business partners, because being aware of what should be helps you to be able to see certain flags when they are on, because there's an expectation of the kind of men you should partner with for different things, and there's an expectation for how you should raise men, as a leader, as a parent, so that they add positively to the environment, society, and to the world at large. It's pretty much like a mentorship experience. So recently, I mean, I do a lot of mentorship, and every time I mentor a mentee, I just marvel at how a life can change based on knowledge. There are a lot of things that we just don't know as young people. or as mentees, because we're all mentees at different cadres of our lives. And if we're open to knowledge or insights or direction, it will tremendously make a big difference in our lives. And when I look back at the roles mentors played in my life up until now, it's something I'm super grateful for. And it's something I wish I even had mentors in other areas of my life as well. But sorry for another day. All right. So I'm just saying this because if you already have a predefined mindset, coming to this podcast, maybe you're religious, you're not religious, or you belong to another religion and all that, it may affect your ability to receive the value. Okay. As I will always say, every human being has his own brain. um, Culture has a huge influence in our lives subconsciously, and so it's important for us to disconnect and think logically and rationally, and be open to perspectives, because at the end of the day we are responsible for the decisions we make in our lives. Okay. All right. Now, we're going to be studying the concept of identity in this podcast. All right. And we'll be juxtaposing how that affects our role as men and even as human beings, generally speaking. I want to make it as simple as possible. And I'll start it this way. I have come to realize that the concept of identity or identity is a figure of speech called paradox. Okay. Paradox is a word that means two opposite things or two different things or something like that. Okay. Now, um, because I work in the field of technology, you guys have to bear with me. I'm going to use a lot of technology examples here. So, identity is anything that uniquely identifies a record or anything, right? So, if you have transactions, or if you a typical example is in a school register or in a company register, if you have someone bearing John Smith or John Ade, if you have two people bearing John Ade, how do you differentiate the two John Ades, right? How do you know which John Ade uh, you refer to at every point in time, right? So to help us achieve that, we introduce something called a primary key. And one of the attributes of a primary key is that it's expected to be unique. So every John Ade would have their unique identifier. In the real world example, um, our travel passports is an example of what a primary key is, right? So a travel passport is designed to be unique. Is impossible, or it's not possible, or it shouldn't be possible for you to have two travel passports with the same name and unique identifying or passport number, as we call it. Okay. So identity is an essence, but in that essence there are various forms. So a human being, we are human beings as form of identity. We identify as human beings. However, there are different human beings and there are different uniqueness of us as human beings. Okay. Now there's something called object-oriented programming, OPP. Object-oriented programming is a model or a style of writing code, writing software, and the focus is to write or develop or write the codes around the concept of an object. Okay, an object is what, to put it simply, we can say a cat is an object, and an object has two classifications, if that's the right word: attributes and functions. Okay, attributes and functions. So an object, if you're going to use cat as an example, um, a cat has four legs. A cat has whiskers. A cat has uh, two eyes. And what does a cat do? A cat drinks milk. A cat eats fish. Cats are flexible. Cats are agile, right? So those are the functions of what a cat does. So the object is a cat. So the position of this style of programming is that as a creative, you imagine what you're trying to build from an object point of view, and then that's how you build it for efficiency and for other benefits like that. Now, I believe that this in itself illustrates or supports the notion of what we call intelligent design. That the same way a creator, a developer has to think from an object perspective to create value, to create a solution, right? Is also alludes that the fact that we're existing as human being, as our identity and different identities, means that we have a creator. We have someone who has designed us. A very good example of everything I'm saying here is DNA. Okay, if you don't understand what intelligent design means, it's to put it simply, it just means that the world is too organized to be a coincidence. The world is too organized to be a coincidence. The way the earth revolves around the sun, the way the moon revolves around the earth is revolving around itself. We have different systems, digestive system, solar system. They say that the eye is one of the most complex organs in the world. I mean, these things are complex designs that are extraordinary, and it's a design. And some people will say that the world has a wisdom around it. DNA is what uniquely identifies every human being, even though we are human beings, right? And we are all human beings. What uniquely identifies us is something called DNA. And you see, it goes to show how we are different from a factory line or an assembly line. So if you take two cars, you can see that a VIN number uniquely identifies two cars, right? But if you remove the VIN number from two cars, you can. I argue that it's difficult for you to tell which is which. Okay, new cars, right? But for us human being, you can't take out our DNA because it's at a cellular level. So it uniquely identifies us. And I believe this goes to show a love intention that in as much as there are billions of people in the world, every single human being is unique. And I see a love intention, behind that, which we would look at in the course of this discussion. Now, some people have argued that the intelligent design theory doesn't provide answer to all aspects of this rational reasoning. So things like philosophical decisions or ethical theories, you can't parallel them with the concept of intelligent design. I quite agree with that. But even in philosophical theories like ethics is simply the reasoning of right and wrong. And I also mentioned earlier that people have come up with different ethical theories. You can still navigate. You can still you can still tell that it still proves that there is a creator. So, for example, um, after the whole Nazis and everything, all that happened in Germany, and when some soldiers were being persecuted, um, they were in their defense. They said that everything they did was in the Constitution, but they were judged wrong because while everything is in the Constitution, it was said that human beings naturally have a compass of what is fundamentally right or wrong, right? So, what I'm saying here, what some people have postulated is that if there is a moral law or moral compass, then there is a lawgiver. So if there is a law, then there is a lawgiver. Okay. And I'm saying all this just to help us dial back into the concept of identity, because one of the things we're going to try and showcase is that identity is not isolated on its own. Identity has a relationship attribute to it, and we're going to be looking at it. But before we get there, let's look at the classifications based on research, the classifications of identity. People have classified the concept of identity into various attributes. So, a common one is by some researchers that there are three attributes. One is self, social, and role. Self are your mannerism, your behavior, your character. You find two people that are raised twins. One is funny, one is not. One likes fish, one doesn't like fish. So pretty much mannerism. The second is social. Social is like your ethnic background, your race, your religion, your class, gender. Are you a high economic class, low economic class? And the last one is role. Things like you're the chief digital officer, you're the president. These are also some forms of identity. Another classification that I find more interesting has something called three C's: core, chosen, and given. So the core is also like behavior, attributes, mannerism, etc. Chosen are things that you decided to, titles that you are elected or selected for you, uh, president, etc. And giving are things that you absolutely do not have control over. Where you were born, the time you were born, different things and common ones that you and I know. So those things you are it's just how you are. You don't have control over it. And I will often joke that you may change the logo of a Toyota to a Mercedes and call it a Mercedes, but fundamentally it's a Toyota. It can't change. It's not going to change. Anyway, that's just on a lighter note. Now let's try and put some definitions here. If you check your Google, your dictionary or ChatGPT or whatever, identity is defined as your sense of self or sense of what. The concept of identity sits at the core of every human being and it is highly subconscious. Please underline that the concept of identity is highly subconscious. So, identity is not something that we wish away or we just change the title. It's something that has to be addressed at a subconscious fundamental level. Very important. Our sense of worth or how we see ourselves is highly influenced positively or negatively. And that's why we're having this conversation because we want to try and make that positive. To put this in practical terms, based on this last definition, Germans are known for their efficiency. Chinese are known for their innovation. A person's decision to eat meat or not to eat meat based on religious values is not because the person ate it and did not like it. These are just like organized religious rules that people have taken on. The mindset to see a woman as an object or beneath you is usually a cultural perspective. It's something that has been influenced into you, uh, and so many other things we can see from a practical point of view. All of these examples exude a subconscious force or a knowledge guiding the person to influence the person towards a choice. Okay, there's a body of knowledge, a fortified body of knowledge that has um, influenced a person to think a certain way. Okay, according to researchers, they say when something is done over and over and over again or perceived a certain way, the brain accepts it as a norm. That's what some Christians call stronghold or things around that area. Unfortunately, some of us take on identities that are bad for us and those around us. And this forms, as I said, the crux of this teaching. Okay. For example, a child that is born to a father and the father decides that he's going to play the role of an uncle instead of a father would definitely pose a problem. Okay, because like we looked at in the first episode, a father has a role in every family. It's a design. A child needs the nurture of both a father and a mother. So when the father decides to take the role of an uncle, then you have a problem. It is what some people have coined as identity crisis. Identity crisis. I'll give you a funny example. So back in Nigeria when I was growing up, um, we didn't have technology wasn't as great as it is now. So most households would usually outsource blending large quantity of pepper or beans. So if you need to blend a large quantity of pepper, you have to go to a pepper grinder or whatever. And I still recollect those machines, very, very loud machines and very ill looking machines sometimes. So there was this day, I guess my mom was used to sending the help or sending my sisters, but no one was around. So my mom decided to send me to go and blend the pepper. And I didn't take it lightly. I didn't like the idea. I did it, but I did it very reluctantly. And I did it because I grew up with the understanding that men are not supposed to take up certain responsibilities like helping your mother. To put it simply like that, to put it bluntly, in reality, you grew up with the mindset that men are not supposed to be doing some domestic things. So It's funny how those mindsets as a child, you pick it up from somewhere. So by definition, identity crisis based on psychological research refers to a period of uncertainty or confusion in a person's sense of self. It was first introduced by Eric Erikson, who is a developmental psychologist, as part of his stages of psychological development. He argues that identity crisis is most common during adolescence, age 12 to 18. Very insightful facts there for us to understand how we should take feedback from our kids at that age. They are going through a lot. As individuals struggle to define who they are, their values, and their role in society. However, identity crisis can occur at any stage in life, particularly during major life transitions. And he went on to provide, and let me also add, yes, wrong affirmation of one's self, sense of self. Let me add that. That he went on to give a list of possible causes of identity crisis, traumatic events, life transitions, cultural and societal expectation, digital and social media influence, which is a major factor in our time and age, and role confusion. Okay, now what does all this mean? It means that our fundamental sense of identity has to be solid. It has to be firm. Okay, now this doesn't mean that we are not all in a journey of coming to the discovery of who we are, but it means that as we're in that journey, we are journeying towards what is constant. And I love how the Bible puts it. Permits me if you're not a Christian, but just listen to the facts. So I think it's First Corinthians 13. It says that God's word or God's nature is like a mirror. As we constantly look at that mirror, we are transformed into the positive image of that mirror. So it means that the image itself, the mirror itself is a constant, but we are on a journey, a constant journey in conforming to that perfect image in that mirror. And that is our test right there. That's the test of understanding if our identity is solid or not. If it keeps changing based on what everybody says, then there might be a problem. All right. Now, I love how Charlotte Cassie defines something he calls codependency. It says someone whose core identity is underdeveloped or known, and who maintains a false identity built from dependent attachment to external sources, a partner, spouse, family, appearances, work, or rules. These attachments create both the illusion of a self and a form from which to operate, to survive in a world defined by others, knowing, in brackets, more about those in power than about himself or herself. This is spot on because I experienced this growing up. When I was like really, really young growing up, I didn't have a sense of identity. So I was the last child from a family of five, but with other extended families. I was spoiled. I was like last born. Everybody took care of me, and it was nice and all. But I didn't have my sense of my own identity. I wanted to do what everybody thought was cool, and so I ignored what I really liked, and I accepted what other people thought was cool for me to like. I hope that makes sense. So I grew up with that, and trust me, it's not a great experience because um, you're not happy. You're just doing things to make other people happy. It's a miserable way to live your life. Okay. And I love what Jesus did again. And I'm going to be reintroducing a lot of us to who Jesus Christ really is. Jesus threw a spanner in the wheel of this concept of identity. It said something so profound. It said, a man's worth is not dependent on the things he has or doesn't have. That's just mind blowing. A man's worth is not dependent on the things he has or doesn't have. Mind blowing, mind blowing. And this is a litmus test to say if If I don't have the things that I hold as identity right now, my position, my Instagram handles, my number of followers, what is my sense of self? What is my sense of self? Very, very, very profound statement. If you lose all that you have now, wealth, we don't. It's not a good thing. It's not something we desire, but it happens. And it has happened to so many people. What is my sense of self? So Jesus's lens on identity seems to value human life over the things we have or doesn't have. Again, I'm reintroducing us to the person of Christ from a perspective of love that we're going to be looking at. And I feel this is super exciting. I feel this is an amazing perspective to see of the value that we all have. We are not lost in the numbers, we are not lost in the billions. We are valuable and we are unique in the billions, and we need to operate in our uniqueness. Okay, we need to, when the Bible says, when Jesus says things like God is able to count every single strand of hair on our head. It's amazing. It's attention to detail. One of the love languages, they say, is attention, right? And imagine how Jesus is explaining how much attention, how much detailed attention God pays to everyone. I feel life has a way of, again, based on all these ethical theories, has a way of making some people feel they are not valuable, making some people feel like they are dispensable, but there's a different perspective of identity that I'm trying to introduce to us. And again, all this is all related to our role as men, so we don't feel over pressured to do things based on culture or based on society that makes us miserable at the end of the day. Now, tying it down into um, the concept of how relationship affect identity. But before I mention that, I want to share a story about how I even got into tech and everything. So, from the story I shared earlier about being the last one and everything, and my parents were doing pretty well, I was going to good schools and everything. But unfortunately, my dad's business hit a snag, and things started going like really bad. We didn't have as much money anymore. We were selling cars, selling things, and it went really like from here to here, right? And I remember being lost in that moment. I didn't feel the sense of security I used to feel from everybody, because everyone was all trying to figure out their lives. And for the first time, I realized that I had nothing to live for. There was nothing unique about me. There was nothing valuable. It was quite a traumatic experience. Yes, someone might say that every child goes through that, but it was such a traumatic event, coupled with me going through that process of adolescence and trying to discover who I was. And and honestly, one of the reasons why the whole concept of Christianity made sense to me, honestly, at that time, not because I was just being introduced to Christianity, I grew up in a Christian home, was when I saw the perspective of God's love and validation for me as a person. Not because of any morality that I had, not because of any money or anything I had to offer, but showing me the potential that He has put in me. It was honestly what made me decide to give this whole Christianity thing a chance. And it's been an amazing journey, which I'll be sharing now and eventually. Okay, now moving on, we're trying to look at the relationship between the influence of relationship and identity, and there's a relationship. And I like how Eric Erickson provides this insight. He says life does not make any sense without interdependence. It says we need each other, and the sooner we learn that, the better for us. Now, it is a scientific fact that we can find relationship in DNAs. So, when you find when you find disagreement between who is the father of a child or mother of a child, the answer is DNA, and nobody denies the evidence that DNA provides. Again, truth is objective. So DNA, we're able to use DNA to establish the relationship between a child and child's father, right? So in the same way, we can establish our DNA with the DNA of what we should be, of what essence created us. All right. So there's an essence that created us, and like we defined object-oriented programming, there's a way we are designed to function. When we function counter to how we should function is what I call perversion. If a car is designed to drive to a destination by putting the gear on D, if you put the gear on reverse and you drive in reverse to your destination, that's not how the car was designed. That's not, you're abusing the functionality of that reverse. It's not designed for that long extended movement. Okay, so I'm trying to establish the fact that when you trace our DNA back, our essence back to what originally created us, we're able to see how we should function. And when we establish that and function in that, then we have what we call a thriving society, a thriving family. One of the things we established in the first podcast is that this world is designed to function in love. It's not a religious belief or fact. It is a philosophical fact that when we understand what it means to love, and you find love at the family level, love at society level, love at a country level, we have established heaven on earth. But unfortunately, we don't know how to love. So we need to dial back to our ability to love. Now, Jesus explained this aptly in what he told his disciples. He said that they should be careful of the leaven of the Pharisee. Unfortunately, they even argued about it, thinking it was about loaf of bread. But what Jesus was saying is that be careful what influences your thought process, your mindset, etc. So he is establishing the fact that there's a possibility of being influenced negatively. So another couple of verses, Jesus said that we should guard our hearts with all diligence. He says that as a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. So essentially saying that we need to guide the essence of our ideal functionality, the ideal way we should function. Okay. And Jesus expressed a lot of validation he got from his father. You know, as Christians, we believe that God is the Jesus. In fact, the Bible says that Jesus is the expressed image of the Father, and there's a terminology used to say Jesus is the Son of God. And sometimes a lot of people misunderstand the terminology, but let's leave that aside. Now, if you're going to follow that analysis or that thought process of Jesus being the Son of God, right? Jesus got a lot of validation from his father according to the Bible. There were instances when God appeared and says, "This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. This is my beloved son, listen to him." Jesus himself will say that a son of man will go according to the plans of the Father. So one of the things Jesus tries to show as a man on earth is that there was a need for him, as even as God in the form of human form, to constantly align his movement and his thinking and everything with God's expectation. That was an amazing template for us to live our lives, not just as Christians, but as human beings, um, joyfully and fruitfully. Okay. Now, without so much time, I'm going to summarize what it means to be a Christian and the concept of Christianity. So, the summary of what Jesus came to do was to introduce us back to our source, our real source. All right. And what Jesus tries to showcase is that the nature of God is love. All right. The nature of God is love. Love is not what God does, love is who He is. Okay. Now, I know that a lot of us are probably thinking about so many scenarios in the Old Testament in the Bible that showcases God in a certain way that does not depict love. But let's put that aside and just think rationally. If the nature of something is love, and the Bible says God doesn't change, then the only thing that nature will produce is the fruit of the nature. Jesus explained this when he said that, an apple tree would not produce orange fruits, and an orange tree will not produce apple fruits. So, if the nature of God is love, then what he would manifest will always be love, which means that most of those things we read we probably need the right interpretation or the right context for it, but that's a topic for another day. Now, while we read a lot of things about God, the main express nature of God, according to the Bible, is who we see in the person of Jesus Christ. And I believe that that's one of the reasons why God had to come in the person of a human being to show us an example, a clear illustration, well documented. And again, we reference the Bible because the Bible is an amazing historically verified fact. The Bible is not just mythical and magical. It's not like a claim that the book fell from the sky. No, it's historical. And as an apologetic or studying to become an apologetic, you find amazing, numerous evidential facts that the Bible accounts actually happened and are real, recorded by both Christians and non-Christians. It's a historical. Okay, so that's why we would refer to a lot of Bible references because they can be fact checked, as we'll say. All right. So now the idea is that through Christ and in Christ, we are aligned back to our nature. All right. The nature of what gives us capacity to love like God loved. So when we receive that nature that God has, then we have the capacity to do the things that He did or the things that He does. Okay. And that's the essence, that's the goal here. So Jesus reintroduced to us what love really is. He said these things, and I'm going to read out here. It says, first, um, it says, love is not jealous. And it started by saying what love is not. So you can find examples of what may seem like love, but they are not, the motive behind it is not love. Okay, so Jesus started by that. He mentioned some acts that may seem like love, but the motive behind it is not love. Now, Jesus now started saying things like love is not jealous, love is not selfish, love is not boastful, love is not proud, love is not rude. He now started saying other things that love is. Love believes, love is patient, love is not irritable, love does not rejoice about injustice, love is the greatest. You see, it's important for us to establish what love is because unfortunately, I think the media has printed the wrong meaning of love, like a mixed understanding of love. We see love as something just romantic all the time and soft and indulging and all that. But love is the most powerful force in the world, I dare to say. Because if indeed true, the maker of the universe loved his own so much, you know, the biggest gift he gave the world is not he is love. So love is not just is a powerful force. It's the most powerful force. I always love to use the reference by this movie, uh, Interstellar. I think it's Interstellar. Yeah. I mean, I love watching movies, and I love the fact that there's a scene in the movie where they had to take a decision between going to two planets. One, the math worked out to try out the planets for human living, and the other decision was to go to a planet because the lady or the character felt a sense of love connection and love towards, I think, her husband who had got the power. And so the message there was that love transcends. Love is a it was at the end of the day love won. Love is a powerful force anyway. So you know the nature we are trying to dial back to is a nature according to the Bible again, is a nature that exudes gentleness, exudes meekness, exudes self-control. Very important, which I'm going to dial into. And I love that part because that self-control illustrates that love is not always an emotion. Love is not just a feeling, or is not always a feeling, or is not necessarily validated by a feeling. Love is obedience. Love is choosing. Okay. So, and I'll give some examples here now. So, if you now think the core of this thinking applied to men means that as married men, despite our desire to want to sleep with other women that is not our spouse, we choose not to. Self control. And why? Because we love our spouse. We are taking the decision to love our spouse. We are taking the decision to love our children, to show them examples, or not to take decisions that may disrupt the family. We are taking the decision to love the person we have those sensual desires towards, because we don't want to be selfish. We love the person enough to say no to those desires. And we are loving the person's spouse as well, because we would not like something like that to happen to us. So this is what love truly is. And this is what should be constant. This is our nature. Okay. Our commitment to the above is what makes us guard our heart, as I wrote here, guard our heart diligently by removing every influence that may affect us in taking the wrong decision. Does that, I think that's just amazingly rational. That's just amazingly rational, in my opinion. As a business owner, contrary to popular opinion, it's not about profit making only, but it's about creating value, creating a solution for the environment. So I'm not just looking at how I am just going to make profit, and I don't just about my profit, but I'm also looking at how I'm creating value, that is creating a solution and empowering people in different ways. As policymakers, how are we making? Does this love forms the crux of the motive behind the policies that we form? As employees, how we work, the integrity of how we work as though our supervisor is God. We work as though, because God sees us everywhere. So we don't have the luxury of, cursing out our supervisor when our supervisor isn't there. Because if you see God as a supervisor and he sees us all the time, then we can't curse. That's on lighter note. But the essence is that the excellence of our work, and I want to mention that point, that these things are not designed to make us mediocre. Rather, they are designed to make us see the excellent spirits and value we're required to provide. And I'm going to deviate a bit. As a father, as an uncle, our intention is to showcase good values for those who are depending on us. As a pastor, right, who love members of your church, uh, we have to love them beyond our desire to validate our ego. We want people to see us as respected, so sometimes we manipulate people to with some stories or things or Bible jargons or Christian jargons to make them see us in awe. We have to love them enough and love God enough to be able to resist those things. As members of the church, we have to love our leaders, love our pastors by not endorsing bad and wrong behaviors. That's false loyalty. And I will often say, if we're going to look at the most respected Christian human figure probably in the world, we'll say Paul, Apostle Paul, right? But it's amazing how Apostle Paul himself said that your loyalty to me is only as valid as you see that I am following the examples of Christ. Okay, so we have to be careful. It is not love to be loyal to a fault when a pastor or whatever is doing the wrong things. We have to love the person enough to be able to constructively and in love, disagree or say the right thing. It's not a common view, but it's just what it should be. And I want to mention here that we should be first a Christian before we are a Catholic, before we are an Anglican, before we are a Methodist, whatever it is. Because sometimes you find when people say, "Oh, who are you?" or whatever, I say, "I'm a Catholic, I'm a French." We are a Christian. We are Christians. The values we exude are the values of God's nature emanating through us, not the values of an organized religion, because all these denominations are organized religion. When you study religion, study church history, realize some of the ways these churches broke out were actually very questionable, right? So we can't just take things like that and own it and run with it. We have to see who we are in Christ as our real source of identity to influence our way of thinking and how we make decisions. So I want to dive into a notion that happens sometimes from this concept of love, and maybe the issue people have with this concept of love, right? I think sometimes we like the idea of love, but we don't like the restrictions that love provides. We talked about self-control. We want to follow our desires. We want to follow the things that we lust after, the things that we feel like doing. Okay. And we often interpret that as our authentic self. Okay. Our authentic self is that I feel this certain way, so I have to do that thing. Honestly, to put it bluntly, I think it's rooted in selfishness. And when you study society, society is not designed to function or cannot function in selfishness. The reason they are driving rules is because you have to drive with considerations to others. It doesn't matter if you have a BMW 7 Series, you cannot exceed the speed limit because exceeding the speed limit puts others at risk. So our laws are designed to protect everyone from a point of view that is not selfish. Now, there's a difference between selfishness and self-interest. Something being selfish and looking out for your self-interest. All right. If you treat your wife very well, that's in your self-interest because if she's happy, you're happy. I think the Bible says something about that. Not losing your peace. If you treat yourself at the expense of your wife and family, that's selfishness. If you are consuming things that are harmful to your body, that's selfishness because your body gets old or you get sick and you die. You're not looking out for those who are dependent on you. If you do the opposite of that, that's self-interest because you get to live a long life, a healthy body, and wellness, mental health, etc. If you desire to sleep with another woman's life, that another woman's wife or another if you desire to sleep with another man's wife or another woman's husband, that's selfishness. Okay. Constraining yourself from doing that is in your self-interest because it gives you peace of mind. Okay. And this reminds me of the story of the man who was faithful to his wife but started liking someone, and sometimes his wife would joke. When he gets back from work, your wife does this joke where she will like, I know what you did. And in the moment she makes that statement, he freezes in his mind and start thinking, oh, did she see my chat with this person? Oh, did she snitch? His mind starts racing all over the place and his blood pressure goes up. But he said when he sort of broke that, all that, it killed all that, it burnt the bridge. And when its wife does that, he's totally at peace. Because there's nothing to hide anymore. Okay. So yeah, so moving on, I just want to reemphasize the fact that you are valued. God values you. God places value in you. There's a saying that if it was just only you in the world, God would have still done what he did by suffering and dying for you on the cross. I love how the Bible puts it that who for the love that was set before him, meaning that because of the love that was set before him, he endured the cross. He despised the shame just so that he can give you and I the opportunity and the empowerment to be able to do the things we are designed to do. Okay. Um, so we are loved, we are purposed, we are authentic, we are valuable. Our decision to accept Christ provides us with a new identity, and that's very important. The Bible has made us understand that the concept of new identity in Christ is a belief system. It's not a concept of being achieving a validation based on your moral efforts. No, it's a faith, it's a belief system that avails us with a gift of God's righteousness towards us, which essentially means that God empowers us to be able to love the way he has designed us to love. Okay. So the expressions people use that we are grafted in his love. God's spirit testifies to that spirit that we are his children. I love how the book of John puts it that, how amazing God's love is, that God made provision for us to be called his children. While we're yet sinners, while we're yet lost, while we're yet his enemies, he made the decision out of love to die for us. So this is who Christ is. Is an amazing, mind-blowing love story, love experience. The Bible says we are now joint heirs with Christ. We are, see, the Bible is associating us with the most important family or kingdom ever. Okay. Sometimes in our world system, how we see powerful people, or as your association with someone who is powerful, is a form of identity. Something happens sometimes in Nigerian context, when maybe you're driving, or if someone is driving, and there's an accident or something, and then you find the two people coming out and they are at each other's neck, and they're all saying, "Do you know who I am? Do you know? I will show you who I am." And there's a desire for one person to call someone in the military or call someone in the police to show that I am someone who is very valuable. So we see that there's a desire to show an association to make the other people respect us. Now, off of that, God has called us to be identified as His own. What can be more important than the maker of the universe doing that? All right. So those are some of the amazing things that we need to start seeing, and we need to start enjoying and valuing, so that we can get the best value out of our identity and posture and thinking as men. Every single human being is beautiful and valuable. I love something that was shared in my in my ethical class, which is that what makes a man a man? What how do you what makes a man a man? Is it the fact that a man has two legs, a man has two eyes, two hands? Does it mean that if the two hands are missing, or the legs are missing, that individual is not a human being? No, our essence is what makes us a human being. And a human being is still valuable without two legs, without two hands, without any other thing that may be missing. Okay. So it's important for us to fight against the lie. There's a lie in our paradigm, in our times, that is trying to posture certain things as our sense of identity. You know, we feel that we have to be popular to fulfill our identity. Popular validation, clout, as we put it sometimes. We want to be famous. Not everyone is designed to be famous, to put it bluntly. All right. Our life does not have to follow the pace and path and timing of the next person. The fact that you have a colleague and he got married before you, had kids before you, it doesn't mean your life is going in off tangents. Everybody has their own trajectory and uniqueness, and you have to value that. Okay, your value is not in how articulate you are, or your nature of grammar. Again, we're not trying to be accept mediocre standard of way of living. We are established that we have an excellent spirit, and we are desire we have to work as though we are working unto God excellently. But we can't use those things in the journey of our lives to judge ourselves as not being valuable. Okay. uh, I wrote here that the moment you consciously or subconsciously start feeling pressure to be accepted or valued by certain people, you have stopped living. We have to be careful not to live our lives based on the validation of other people. Anyone who makes you feel less of a person or not worth it, you have to be careful of such association. Okay. This is not to say we can't judge, or we can't say, "Oh, you did something wrong," but in terms of, we're talking about a sense of self here. Okay. And when I always say that when other people have certain things going, we celebrate them and not feel as if, or not rob our joy off, the good things or the blessings other people have. Now, this is to explain, and I'm running up here, that our biggest battle is actually in the mind. Our biggest battle is in the mind. The battle of life situations, circumstances that are trying constantly to alter our sense of identity, lying to us that we are what we are not, lying to us and trying to give us names or identity that don't belong to us. One of the biggest, if you look at all the temptations recorded in the Bible towards Christ, they were all associated with his identity. If you are the Son of Man, do this. If you bow down before me, all associated around identity. Adam's temptation, as we say while we're here today, were all around identity. If God, if you are truly, how was it said? uh, that the temptation of Adam was around God has said to him, "You are this and don't do this," and the devil challenged to say, "That's not true. If you do this, you would know." So it's a concept of not believing his identity in what Christ has said, but trying to now come up and discover his own identity by himself, something like that. If you also look at the temptation of when Peter challenged Christ to say, Christ was saying that, "Hey, I'm going to go to the cross, I'm going to die." And Peter, in his own loving, said, "No, that's not going to happen to you." And you could see how Jesus really, really attacked that situation, because anything that tries to attack your sense of identity in Christ has to be addressed very strongly and harshly, because it's totally against what will bring you true joy and happiness. Now, for me, one of the most powerful prayer you can ever pray for anyone is the prayer that Paul prayed in Ephesians 1 verse 8, which says that, "I pray that your heart will be flooded with light, so that you can understand the confident hope he has given to those he called." Which people? The people he called is holy people, who are his rich and glorious inheritance. So, as to paraphrase it, right, Paul is saying that, "I really, really pray that your eyes will be open to see. I really, really hope that you would come to that understanding, come to that revelation that I am valued, I am super, super valued. I am thought about. I am intentional, you know, to see that, you have God, to see that you are his masterpiece, to see that you are his holy nation, as the Bible puts it, to see that you are his prized inheritance. So it therefore means that the principle of growth as a Christian is a constant focus on who God says, or on who God is. So when we keep, like I used the illustration of the mirror, when we constantly look at that perfect image, we see that we are not trying to be accepted by God. We see that we are accepted by God. So because we are accepted, then we manifest certain attributes or certain behaviors. I love how Dr. Geisler put it in his book titled Christian Ethics. And he says, "The ethical imperatives that God gives are in accord with his unchangeable moral character. That is, God wills what is right in accordance with his own moral attributes." So he says, the Bible says, "Be holy, for I'm holy." And let me put it in another way. Because I am holy, I have given you the gift of holiness. Because I am holy and you have my nature, you also have the capacity to be holy like I do. He also went on to say that the concept of moral law or natural law is prescriptive, not descriptive, meaning we discover that we have God's nature to help us make the right decisions, and not just, "Oh, yeah, I have this nature, so yeah, I just have this nature," or "This is how things are, so yeah." It's to enlighten us, to help us make the right decision. I'm going to stop here. There's so much more to come. I've said so much. Some may disagree, some may not, but understand that the goal is to empower someone to be able to see that you are being gifted with the opportunity to live a fulfilled life, a joyful life, a life that brings positivity to the world, and that's the goal. And that's, by helping someone, that person also helps others. I'll be happy if you can share this with other people. I want to let you know that you are loved. I want to let you know that you have good in you through Christ. And I call this the good news. The good news is that we are not without help. Okay. And I hope that this will help you learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I hope that this will help you um, seek more knowledge, seek more knowledge that validates who God has made you to be and the purpose of God in your life. Thank you so much for your time with me. God bless you and have a good one. Till our next episode. Bye.